In the hallowed pages of the Bible, there exists a tale often overlooked but deeply profound, the story of Mephibosheth. It's a story that weaves through triumph and tragedy, loyalty and loss, grace and redemption. And though his name might not be as familiar as those of David, Saul, or Jonathan, Mephibosheth's journey is one that echoes timeless truths. Who was Mephibosheth? What became of this child of royal blood who grew up amidst betrayal, war, and brokenness? Let us dive into his story, exploring not only the events of his life, but also the powerful lessons they hold for us today. To understand Mephibosheth, we must first look to his grandfather, King Saul, a man who loomed large in Israel's history. Saul was the first king of Israel, anointed by the prophet Samuel. Tall, handsome, and a fierce warrior, he seemed the perfect choice to lead the nation. But Saul's reign was marred by disobedience and pride. In 1 Samuel 15, we learn of Saul's most devastating act of defiance, his refusal to obey God's clear command during a battle with the Amalekites. This act cost him God's favor. From that moment, Saul's destiny began to unravel. God sought a new leader, a man after his own heart. That man was David, a shepherd boy from Bethlehem. While David's rise was marked by courage and faith, it also brought him into direct conflict with Saul. Jealousy consumed the king, and Saul's relentless pursuit of David turned into an obsession. Amidst this turmoil, a surprising and unshakable friendship blossomed. Jonathan, Saul's son and heir, recognized God's hand on David. Instead of seeing him as a rival, Jonathan loved David as a brother. Their bond was so strong that they made a covenant, a solemn promise of loyalty and protection. Jonathan declared, "You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you." 1 Samuel 23:17. This covenant would transcend their lifetimes, impacting the generations to come. For Mephibosheth, this covenant would become his lifeline, though he had no way of knowing it yet. The fateful day came during a battle with the Philistines on Mount Gilboa. The account in 1 Samuel 31 is heart-wrenching. The Israelite army was routed, and Saul, gravely wounded, took his own life rather than fall into enemy hands. Jonathan, too, fell that day, fighting valiantly by his father's side. With Saul and his sons dead, the house of Saul crumbled. The throne passed to David, and Saul's remaining family scattered, fearing retribution. Among those fleeing was Mephibosheth, Jonathan's young son. At just 5 years old, his life changed forever. His nurse, in a desperate bid to save him, scooped him up and ran. But in her haste, she stumbled, and the boy fell. The accident left Mephibosheth permanently lame in both feet. In a single moment, he went from being a prince to a disabled orphan. His royal heritage now brought him no privilege, only danger. Mephibosheth's new home was Lo-Debar, a desolate region far from the centers of power. Its name means no pasture, reflecting its barren landscape and bleak prospects. For years, Mephibosheth lived in obscurity, forgotten by the world. His condition made him a social outcast. In ancient times, physical disabilities were often seen as a sign of divine displeasure. Mephibosheth's lameness would have marked him as someone to pity or avoid. But while the world forgot him, one person did not: King David. Years later, after securing his throne and bringing peace to Israel, David remembered his covenant with Jonathan. He asked, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" 2 Samuel 9:1. The answer came from Ziba, a former servant of Saul. He informed David of Mephibosheth's existence and his residence in Lo-Debar. David immediately sent for him. When Mephibosheth was summoned to the palace, his heart must have raced. He knew the customs of the time. Kings often eliminated any potential rivals to the throne. What could David, the man who replaced his grandfather, possibly want with him? When he arrived, Mephibosheth fell on his face before David, trembling. But David's words were not those of a conqueror. They were words of grace. Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land of your grandfather Saul, and you shall always eat at my table. 2 Samuel 9:7. David's actions were extraordinary. Instead of treating Mephibosheth as a threat, he treated him as a son. He restored Saul's lands to him, providing security and wealth. But more than that, he gave Mephibosheth a place at the royal table, a symbol of belonging and honor. Imagine the scene. Mephibosheth, whose feet bore the scars of his fall, now seated among princes. His brokenness was not hidden, yet it was embraced. The name Mephibosheth carries a poignant meaning, the one who removes shame. His life embodied this transformation. From a place of shame and obscurity, he was brought into the light, his dignity restored. Mephibosheth's story is more than a historical account. It is a testament to the power of grace and loyalty. David's kindness reflects God's own heart, a heart that seeks out the lost, restores the broken, and transforms lives. No matter how far we fall, grace can reach us. No matter our limitations, we're not forgotten. Like Mephibosheth, we're invited to sit at the king's table, not because of our worth, but because of a covenant of love. Mephibosheth's story challenges us to reflect. How can we show grace to others? How can we keep our promises even when it's inconvenient? As we ponder these questions, let us carry the lessons of his life into our own. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, no matter your past, God's grace can restore you, just as it did for Mephibosheth.